Okay, we're continuing on here in chapter 17. We're going to look beginning with slide number seven in the PowerPoint. And again, we're talking about the kind of the thinking of the founders and how they tried to keep the United States uninvolved in foreign conflict. Again, they were fine with commercial relations, but not with political alliances and political relations with other countries. Part of this was also due to the fact that America was not the big kid on the block. Okay, we are now. We are, the strongest military in the world. But in 1776, 1777, 1780s, even well into, the 20th century, America just did not have the firepower to just go straight up against the Frances of the world or the Great Britons of the world. Okay, so there was also wisdom in the founders in thinking that, you do not want to start picking fights with the largest nations in the world because we don't have the ability to win. Okay, so if you look at slide number 7, this is President James Monroe in his annual message to Congress in 1823. He says, "Our policy in regard to Europe, which was adopted at an early age of the wars, which have so long agitated that quarter of the globe, nevertheless remains the same, which is not to interfere in the internal concerns of any of its powers." Okay, so again, there's that example of isolationism. Probably my favorite expression of this isolationist policy is in John Quincy Adams, who was the Secretary of State at the time. He gave a speech to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1821. This is before he became president, of course. And he's talking about, again, the United States policy. So when he uses the word she or her, he's talking about the United States. So she, the United States, has, in the lapse of nearly a quarter century, without a single exception, respected the independence of other nations while asserting and maintaining her own. She has abstained from interference in the concerns of others, even when conflict has been for principles to which she clings. Okay, so he's talking about there this idea that, let's say the cause of independence or the cause of freedom or the cause of liberty in another part of the world, one nation is throwing off the colonial rule of another country, exactly like what we did against the Brits. Basically, Adams is saying, listen, we'll cheer that, but we're not going to get involved. We've abstained from getting involved in that. Going on, he says, "Wherever the standards of freedom and independence has been or shall be unfurled, there will be her heart, her benedictions, and her prayers be." So again, when independence is going on in another country, we'll cheer them on, we'll pray, okay, we'll believe that God will shine upon them. We'll be well-wishers from the sidelines, but we're not going to get involved. And then here's the punchline. "But America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy." Okay, in other words, are there plenty of monsters out there? Yes. Are there monsters out there right now? Yes. Is Assad, the leader of Syria, a monster? Yes. Anybody who chemical bombs his own people, he's a monster. Is Kim Jong-un, nicknamed Little Rocket Man by President Trump, is he a monster? Yeah, the guy's got concentration camps. He tortures and murders people at will. He's a monster. Is Vladimir Putin a monster? You might be able to say that. He's done a lot of things that are reminiscent of the old Soviet Union, given the fact that he's a former KGB agent. How about the leader of China? You could say the same thing. He's built concentration camps for Muslims over there. He's thrown tens of thousands of Christians in prison there. Lots of things. In other words, there's some really bad dudes, really bad leaders in our world. Are there monsters? Are they worthy of being destroyed? We could argue the merits of that, but Adams is saying, listen, America doesn't go abroad doing that. We don't go abroad searching for a monster to destroy. Again, the thinking is, if it's not in our self-interest, as bad as that guy is, okay, as bad as that ruler is, that's not what we do. Again, because to commit to that means America becomes basically a military state, a garrison state. Kind of think ancient Sparta, if you know anything about your ancient world history. And Sparta was basically, it was just all military all the time, all war all the time. okay? We're a free people. Okay, the way a republic is set up is that we defer to elected representatives so we can have a life, right? So we can, have jobs and live in peace and go to school and get married and raise families. And in other words, if you're constantly going to war, think about it. In a wartime, you're having to mobilize industry. In a wartime, government's probably going to take over the steel mills, and government's probably going to take over automobile plants, which is exactly what President Trump basically did on Friday. He basically because of this act that they reenacted going back into the Korean War era, it empowers the president to take over auto plants, to build masks, to fight COVID-19. Okay, in other words, the founders were very, they understood there are times you got to go to war, but they also understood that in a time of war, the liberties of the people to freely do what they normally do is going to be dramatically curtailed. So it's really a good idea to not go abroad looking for monsters to destroy. He closes with this: she is the well-wisher to the freedom and independence of all. She is the champion and vindicator of her own. Again, hey, we'll cheer you on, okay, if you're going after independence. We'll pray for you. We'll be well-wishers. But the only people that we're going to champion is our own nation. Okay, so again, that's a great expression of the foreign policy of the United States. So going on now to slide number 9, talking about major foreign policy themes. Following World War II, and again, by necessity, we had to get involved. And America delayed and delayed and were dragging their feet and dragging their feet and dragging their feet all throughout 1940, all throughout 1941. And it took the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, to finally get us to declare war against Japan and Nazi Germany. Okay, and so from that moment on, we became more of an internationalist country, very, very involved in world affairs. We were fundamental in the creation of the United Nations. In fact, the phrase United Nations was coined by FDR. They actually had another term for the Axis powers. They ended up becoming the Allies. but this idea of United Nations, America championed that. So we were greatly involved in a lot of international concerns. So within the Cold War, again, you had the United States, you had the free countries of Europe, okay, up against the Soviet Union and communism. And so you had this Cold War. It wasn't a shooting war, but there was everything but going on. And so the policy that America had was this one of containment. The thinking is, if you could, if you let communism and its spread continually, to continue unchecked, sooner or later it's going to dramatically impact our nation. So the idea of you better contain it where it's starting. Hence the logic of the wars in Korea. Hence the logic of the wars in Vietnam. Okay, this idea that no, Vietnam is not a direct threat to the United States. However, if you let it continue, that whole sector of the globe is going to be controlled by communism. Is that what we want? Okay, so again, you had the idea of the domino theory. If one nation falls, multiple others will fall. So if you can contain it and you can keep that one area of the world and one nation from falling, you're going to prevent this spread. Okay. So again, this idea that America needed to get involved. There's something in World War II where we're in 1938. Attempts were made to give Hitler exactly what he wanted. So the Brits and other European countries, Hitler asked for Czechoslovakia, they're like, okay, fine, we'll give it to you. It was a policy called appeasement. The idea if we could just keep giving what this dictator wants, he won't ask for more. Okay, but dictators generally have a habit of continually asking for more, asking for more, asking for more. And so it's the lessons of appeasement, the lessons of the Munich treaty that basically the Brits signed with the Germans, okay, the Nazis. It was a failure. And so that same logic drove American foreign policy in the 50s and 60s and even up into the 70s to some degree, is this idea of containment. If you look in the next slide, that would be slide number 10, you can see Europe during the Cold War, okay? And you can see the blue nations are NATO, okay, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that, again, those blue nations the United States was in an alliance with. So an attack on one of them by the Soviet Union or their satellite nations would be an attack on the United States and would commit us to get involved. If you look at, again, the more pinkish colored, okay, that's the Warsaw Pact. These are the nations that were aligned with the Soviet Union, okay? Well, aligned with, the Soviet Union actually controlled them and took them over. They didn't really have a whole lot to say about it. But anyway, the point is, it gives you an idea of these areas of tension. And again, remember, America is allied with the NATO countries, so that could get them involved. If you move to the next slide, it talks about some of the major foreign policy themes. That is slide number 11. You know, again, you see the involvement in the Korean War and the Vietnam War. Again, these conflicts had to do with this principle of containment, okay? The Cuban Missile Crisis this occurred in 1960, what would that be, 62, I believe, in October. And basically this was a case where it was discovered by the United States that the Soviet Union was shipping missiles to Cuba. Cuba was installing missile launching stations there. Again, Cuba is significant to the United States because it's 90 miles off our coast. And so the concern was, here you have a major ally of the Soviet Union empowered with intercontinental ballistic missiles that could be launched and literally reach the United States in a matter of minutes or hours, depending on which area of the nation they would aim them at. And so the United States employed an embargo. It caused the Soviet Union to blink, and they basically pulled out of this area and stopped putting missiles there. But again, this was probably the closest the United States and the Soviet Union ever got to World War III. It was really, really that bad. And so in other words, that was a situation that almost brought us to the brink. In the 70s, we engaged in something called détente with the Soviet Union, because of both nations kind of realized, oh my gosh, we actually got that close to World War III. And so basically they engaged in this easing of hostilities. President Nixon went over to China, okay, to try to deal with the communists in China. The United States started engaging in some sort of exchange program, sending students back and forth and different things like that between the Soviet Union and the United States. They tried to do some things to basically limit things because of, again, the concerns of what almost happened in the Cuban Missile Crisis. They signed what was called the SALT Treaty, the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, in 1972. Again, an agreement that, hey, we can destroy the world like, I don't know, 100,000 times over. Maybe we should just limit some of these things so that we can perhaps, get to a place where there's more peace in the world. If you look at slide number 72, you can see where, again, these arms agreements where they tried to limit some of the powers there. The Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. And now you've got this area. In fact, if you look at the slide on page 14, or slide 14 rather, you can kind of get an idea there where you see Russia there on the right side, or that would be the eastern side in the gray. And then you look at some of these other countries: Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Crimea, Georgia. Okay, these were all sections that used to be Russia. Okay, you look at Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and so when the Soviet Union broke up, it basically shrunk to a smaller size, and a lot of these other countries that were part of the Soviet Union decided to form nations of their own. They were given the freedom to do that, and so you had a lessening of tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union, if for no other reason the Soviet Union collapsed and ceased to exist. Okay, the concern now, if you go to slide number 12, Russia under Putin, okay, there is no Soviet Union, and the thinking was for a while, hey, Russia has become more democratic, and they become more free, and they're allowing more elections and things, and they're allowing the newspapers to print more of kind of more of a free press and things like that. Now under Putin, again, Putin's background was the KGB, okay, the secret police of the Soviet Union, and he has basically flexed his muscles a lot more, and he's become more of a hardliner and reducing a lot of civil liberties there. So it'll be interesting to see whether a new Cold War will arise or something like that. That crisis in Ukraine they're talking about is basically in the that would be the eastern section of the Ukraine, northeastern section there, Crimea. This section of the Ukraine was basically taken over by Russia, and so there's Russian troops there. Okay, and where that presented a problem with the United States is Ukraine is part of NATO, so Russia invaded a NATO country. They called up President Obama at the time and asked him, hey, we need help. We've basically been attacked, and basically President Obama basically, stood down, didn't do anything. Okay, we can fault him for that. But then the flip side is, do we really want to go to war with Russia over that? Okay, so these are these challenges of entangling alliances. So I'm going to stop there.